All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm John, and I'm here with the Pennsylvania ACAC Virtual College Fair. This is the Ask the Counselor session. So you're going to be the one that's going to really kind of gravitate and move the conversation along with us today. So please make sure that while you're here, put any question that you have in the Q&A area. It's a button on your screen, and we'll be able to answer the questions that you might have during the time that we have. Remember, this session is all about you, and focus on what you want to know and the important things for yourself as well. So put any questions that you have in the Q&A button area on your screen, and our counselors will be happy to help you. So I'm going to turn it over to them right now, and they will introduce themselves to you, and we can get going with your questions.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you, John. Hi, everybody. I'm Stacey Cunitz, and I am the Director of College Counseling at the Crefeld School, which is a small private school in Chestnut Hill in Philadelphia. And I also have a private practice called Blue Moon Educational Consulting. And I've been doing college counseling since 2005, and I'm very excited to answer your questions today. Cigus.
I am Cigus Vanni. I am a private counselor at this point now. I retired from school counseling 5 years ago. I had 26 years as a high school counselor, 2 private and 2 public schools. Prior to that, I worked for 15 years at a small private liberal arts institution. I was an instructor, assistant dean of the college, and admissions counselor. So I know stuff, and I'm more than happy to share that knowledge with you. No,
it's true. It's true. So as soon as you feel like you have a question, friends, you can add that into the chat. And I see more people are joining us, so that's great. So just to recap, this is Ask a Counselor. So we're here to answer questions. If you want to use the Q&A, you can ask us really anything. We're happy to talk about standardized testing. We're happy to talk about the college application process, about picking colleges. Oh, and we have our first question. So the first question is, how do recommendations work with the Common App? If the student is supposed to submit through the Common App, do they have to create a Common App account first, then provide a link to the person writing the recommendation? I've heard the teachers may use Naviance. Cigus, do you want to take a stab at it and I'll fill in?
well, this is absolutely dependent, Karen, on what platform the high school is using, if any, to provide a link to students' applications. So if your school is using Naviance, the recommendations do not go through Naviance. Your student still makes an account on Common App, does all the normal kinds of things, but the recommendations will be assigned through Naviance. Your student will actually go into his or her Naviance account and assign the teachers to write the recommendations. There's a drop-down menu. They write a little note, they press the button, and Naviance sends an email to the teacher, which contains the link by which it gets uploaded. So the teacher recommendations and the counselor recommendations go through whatever platform the school uses. If no platform, then the school can use the Common App directly, if no platform. And then if your student wants to send a recommendation from somebody not at his or her high school, let's say their ballet teacher, the employer where they've worked for 3 years, the family for whom they've provided childcare for the past 5 years, that recommendation goes through the Common Application if they use it, the Coalition application if they use it, and whatever homegrown application allows it. Not all do, not all do. But the Common App has a place on their platform that's called Other Recommender, and that's where you would assign the other recommender.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation. I don't have much to add except to say that your student, your child will want to create a Common App account. They can actually create that Common App account now, even though Common App is still set up for the class of 2022. What will happen is they can fill out anything. Once you're in the Common App, there are a bunch of tabs across the top, and one of them is called Common App. And everything in there gets rolled over in the next cycle. The recommendations, the FERPA waiver, and all of that is in the My Colleges section, and all of that gets wiped out. So there's no point in doing much in there, or if anything in there right now, but you can create the Common App account now. On August 1st, when you log back in, they'll close it down around July 28th or so for a few days to roll everything over. And then when you log back in August 1st, it'll kind of say, welcome back, and it'll migrate your data. We have another question from Alicia saying, do I have to wait to take my SAT to start application? The answer is no, Alicia, you do not. You can start your applications at any time, like making a Common App account now. When your SAT scores come back, there are some kids who will take, some kids have already taken the SAT. Some kids will take it in May. Some kids will take it in June. You might take it in August or even in October. And so you can, once those scores come back, then you can decide whether or not you want to submit them to whatever school you're submitting to. Yeah, anything else to say about that one, Cigus?
No, it's the fact that anybody age 13 or older can take an SAT when they choose. Anyone aged 14 or older can create a Common App account when they choose. So that the timing is really irrelevant. Alicia, if you're ready for the SAT, go for it. If you're a junior now, I hope you start to get ready for your application soon.
Yeah. Karen has a follow-up question about, I'm sorry. Whoops. Okay, there it is, about submitting scores. So this is a fun one. So Cigus, you can take the first stab at this one. So what's the recommendation on submitting scores for test optional and test agnostic scores? For instance, if you have a 1300 and the school average range is 1220 to 1330, would you recommend to submit? So if you are under the high end of the range, but not by much, what would you recommend?
Oi. That's the first thing I would recommend. Boy, unfortunately, Karen, you're going to hear this answer far too frequently. And I apologize because there's really no better answer. It depends. Depends on the school. It depends on the track record of your high school with that school. It depends on what else your student brings to the table. And it depends on where that 1300 came from. Now, let me explain that last thing. If I'm a student from an underrepresented group in a fairly economically depressed area, my 1300 is higher than your 1300 if you come from an affluent suburb. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous, but I am perceived to have gone through more to be able to receive my 1300. So each school is going to be different. Also, some schools have been test optional for decades, and they have quite a bit of fluidity with that already. And it won't occur to them that it would be, oh, well, okay, we've been doing this for 30 years. Others that have just gone test optional are still going to maybe have a moment of hesitation. But I can say to you from my experience that with the exception of a few schools that are pretty clearly still requiring testing, even though they don't tell you that, virtually all the schools with which I work are really honest and transparent that test optional is test optional.
I think that's a great answer, if frustrating, and sorry. The only thing that I would add to is to think about what your SAT score looks like in the context of the rest of the application. So, you know, if the student is someone who is taking lots of AP classes or is in an IB program and is doing very, very well, and that 1300 feels like low, it feels like not quite measuring up to what they're doing, that may be a good test optional situation. If that 1300, if a student is not really, maybe they're taking one honors class, but they're not taking many APs, and that 1300 is really kind of showing a lot of strength, compared to the transcript, that might be a great score to send in. So I think part of it depends on the college that you're applying to, and a little bit depends on the context of the application. And I think that your school counselor, I hope, can really help you see that as well. And if your school is using Naviance or SCORE or any of the other college counseling platforms, they usually have something called scattergrams, where you can see what the SAT and ACT scores and GPAs of other kids from your school can be, look like in terms of who got admitted and who did not from your school. And so you can see where that 1,300 places you. Okay, we will go to the next question, which is from Michael. And his question is, so if a school's acceptance rate is single digit, let's say 7%, but you look at the last 2 years admission stats, say only 20% of the last few years freshman class are identified as white or Caucasian, and the male-female gender is about 50-50, what chance does a white male really have at the 7% acceptance rate school, even if grades and SATs are well above the published requirements? Should we save the app fee and look elsewhere? I'm going to take a stab at that first, Cigus, and then you can chime in with whatever I miss. One of the things that I'm going to say is that it doesn't matter, I don't think, what your gender or ethnicity is at a school that has a 7% admit rate. You pretty much have a 93% chance of getting rejected, right? We call those likely denied kinds of schools. And so, I think kids should feel free to reach for them if that's something that they want to do. But I think that counting on that is not a good strategy. It's kind of like counting on the lottery as your retirement plan. Not good. The other thing is to remember that 7% of kids who are getting accepted, some of those kids are recruited athletes. Many of them in, sports that are mostly played by wealthy kids, right? So like the sailing team and the fencing team and the crew team. And so there's, that's a lot of white kids, frankly, that are taking up those spots. There are that 7% admit rate also includes big deal donors. It includes a lot of people, and who maybe not you. And so what I would say is that I think sometimes people can get this feeling that as schools try to increase their diversity numbers, that somehow a white kid might be disadvantaged in the process. But the truth of the matter is that most of those schools are not nearly as diverse as this country is. And often if you feel like there's someone taking a spot from your kid, it's probably a white kid who plays a sport. So that's one thing I'll say. But I would not discourage you from applying if you feel like, if the grades and stats are well above the published requirements, if that's, if you feel like a good candidate for that school, it's up to you to decide whether or not you want to save the app fee and look elsewhere. What I will say is that if you're looking for merit scholarship, you're not going to find it at a 7% admit rate school. And there are a lot of opportunities for merit scholarship at schools that have higher admit rates. So that might be a good reason to look elsewhere as well. Cigus, did you want to add anything to that answer?
Amen to the merit scholarship, Stacey. That's a great point to do. Yeah, I would say if you do your research and you look through the schools that are appropriate for you academically, socially, emotionally, and you come across some that happen to be highly rejective, let's say that, then I think you owe it to yourself to apply. And if you're a white male, it may be that there are certain majors that would favor you. A white male majoring in gender studies, a white male majoring in fine arts. So there may be reasons why you would be appropriate to that college for their needs. And understand, college admissions is not just for students. It's for the colleges. Like, they're trying to craft a class. And the best way to look at it is college admissions is not a blanket. That's the same stitch over and over again. It's a quilt. And a quilt is a series of patches. So here's patches for athletes, and here's patches for legacies, and here's patches for international students. And that's what the college is trying to do. And yes, these patches may take up a bit of the class, but never all of it. And so if it is a school appropriate for your son or daughter, then I think you owe it to at least explore the possibility of applying.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. Okay, and we have another question. And that question is, what should I be doing right now as a freshman? And I don't know what your answer is, Cigus, but my answer is living your best 14 or 15-year-old life.
Yes,
Get
being
involved.
goofy. Yes.
Yeah, get involved in your activities as much as you can. The pandemic's been really hard on all of that, but as much as you can be involved. And activities, it doesn't matter what that activity is, whether you are dog walking or some other job, or whether you're playing in the marching band, or you're an athlete, or whether you are eating at every pizza place in your town and making a blog about which one is better. There you go. So, but whatever you're doing, dig in and do it with passion and find out who you are. And then I would say, in terms of your classes, take the hardest classes that you can still thrive in. And don't forget about the words still thrive in, right? Like you want to do well in school, and you want to push yourself a little bit and challenge yourself, but not to a place where you're pushing yourself off the cliff. You want to stay engaged and challenged and be engaged in your life. What else you got for that one?
Amen. You are right on target with that, Stacey. I would say, if you have ideas of future goals for yourself, and I'm not putting pressure on you that you do. I think when I was 14, I wanted to be Julius Caesar. So I didn't have a clear goal of what I wanted. So if you do, then you can draw some maps for yourself. So if you say, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a physician, then you know the path that you have to take. And then that will help you in choosing your classes in high school, to make sure that you take A, the classes that are appropriate to reach that goal, and B, the ones that are at the highest level that you can maintain to do. Okay. Does the GPA for 12th grade matter? Big time. Stacey?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. So if you're applying, if you are sending in your application in October or November, the colleges are likely going to see your first quarter grades when they are making their decision about you. If you're applying early action or early decision or rolling admission. If you're applying in January, they are likely going to see your first semester grades. Regardless, if you get accepted and you decide to enroll, they will see your final senior year grades. And every acceptance letter says some version of, this acceptance is conditional upon you completing high school the way that you have been doing high school, something like that, right? So if you've been a straight A student and then in the second half of your senior year, you drop down to C's, you can actually have your admission rescinded. And you don't want that to happen. So yes.
Right. And let me give an analogy for this. I'll use the Philadelphia Flyers hockey team, Christopher. How many times this year have the Flyers gained the lead in the first period, held it in the second period, and lost the game in the third period? You can't fall asleep in senior year. That's the third period of a hockey game. And if you do, you're going to lose the game.
There you go. All right, question from Karen. She has lots of questions, which we're really happy about, Karen. That's totally fine. She says, I know early decision does not impact financial aid, but will it affect merit scholarship opportunities, given they know you are obliged to commit? So that's the first question, and we'll start with that one. And then there's a second question. So John, don't erase this question yet, because we're going to get to that second one. Cigus, you want to take a stab at it first?
Well, the easy answer is no. because merit scholarships are different from need-based scholarships. So the need-based scholarships are the ones that are figured out for the financial aid. Merit-based are, I'm going to say, not completely independent of that, but for the most part, independent of that to do. And so if, for example, if your son or daughter is within the qualities and the characteristics to earn a merit scholarship, they will be offered that merit scholarship, period, to do.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to that is I don't think that there's a school that's going, oh, you know, early decision, we don't have to give Karen the merit scholarship. Like that's not a part of it. But you're not going to get the benefit of hearing what the other schools might offer in terms of merit scholarship, right? So, you know, there might be, you might have chosen to apply, let's say you applied early decision to school A, and it turns out school B would have given you a really amazing package, but you don't ever really get the opportunity to find that out. And so I think that for, you know, if you are someone who is very low income and has an expected family contribution of 0 or very, very low, close to 0, early decision actually can make a lot of sense if you're applying somewhere that meets full financial need, because they have set you as AFC of 0. They've said they'll meet your full financial need. You're going to get a really good package for them, from them. And if you're a family that can afford to write a check for $85,000 today and not really sweat it, and you don't really need to worry about that, well, good on you. And, you know, that's fine too. There are a lot of families, though, who fall into a third category, which is we're not going to qualify for much financial aid, maybe not even any, and yet we don't know how we're going to pay for this thing. It's a lot of money, and we cannot figure that out. And those families often really do want to look at merit scholarship offers and be able to compare them. And so early decision may not be the right choice in that case. Do you think that's true, Cigus?
Absolutely true. And one thing that students and parents can do now that wasn't available even as early as 5 years ago is to go on each website for each college and complete what's called the net cost calculator. So if I want to apply to, say, North Jesus College, I can go to their website and I can find that, and I can put in all my information, income, assets, everything that's there. And by law, I have to get an answer from them that's within 5% of what a family of my means received last year. So if I put the numbers in and North Jesus says, oh, you'll need to pay $47,000 a year, I might look at West Buda. But if North Jesus says to me, oh, okay, you'll pay $7,307, I'm like, sign me up. That's a good way to determine where you're going to land. Now, it's not perfect, but it's going to give you a really, really fair estimate.
Yeah, and every college has that on their website.
Correct.
All right, we're going to go to Karen's next question, which is, if a student has an IEP or a 504, does it harm, help, or not at all impact mentioning this in the application and/or essay? You want to go first?
Actually, you're the expert on this, Stacey. You go.
Well, okay. I feel like you also have a lot of expertise, Cigus, but I will say my piece and say that I think it really, again, it depends on the kid, right? So what I think about the 90s song from CNC Music Factory, you might remember it. It's things that make you go, and that was one of their songs, right? And so what we don't want is for your application to make the admissions officer go, And so if you're like a straight A student, but you're getting C's in math, and that's because you have a math LD, but you're not explaining that and no one's talking about it, like that might make an admissions officer say, well, what's going on with this kid in math, right? So I think there are times when it makes sense to disclose if that's something that means something to you and you want to do it, but it's also your right not to. Your counselor can't, nor can your teachers without your permission. And so there are kids who will go through the entire process and never disclose that they have any kind of diagnosis or disability, get into the school and then go and say, hey, guess what? I need accommodations, and start working with the Office of Disability Services. But there are other kids for whom it's an important story to tell, their autism diagnosis, or, you know, their struggle with ADHD in school, or whatever it's been. And sometimes there's a lot of triumph in how students have been able to figure things out for themselves and overcome. So I will say that my daughter, my youngest daughter, is diagnosed with dyslexia, and she did reveal that in her essay, because her essay wasn't about that, but in her essay, she was talking about this thing that was really hard, that it was like a goal she had set for herself and a thing that was very hard to do. And she talked about that one of the motivating factors for her to keep going was that people had underestimated her in the past because of her dyslexia. And she did not want to be underestimated, and she did not want to underestimate herself. And she wanted to do this thing and reach this challenge, and she did it. And that didn't seem to impact her college admission decisions at all. So I would say you need to do, again, what's right for you. And it depends is always our answer. Anything to add there, Cigus?
No, that absolutely right on. It really depends on the situation. Yeah.
All right, I'll let you take the next one, which is from Michael. He says, I have heard that test optional issue has in a way artificially decreased admit rates. For example, Northeastern was listed at about 20% acceptance. Now I hear their stating acceptance rate is down to maybe 10%. However, are they still looking at qualified candidates with high SAT scores as they did when the admit rate was 20%?
Well, answer the second part first, Michael. The answer is yes. They're absolutely looking at all candidates the way they used to. Maybe they won't have as much room because there's more people applying. And so let me do the second part. What are the reasons why so many of these schools have become so selective? There are several. One is that simply there are more students applying, and there are more students sending more applications, the number of applications that students would submit. This is due to a number of things. This is due to anxiety. The more the selectivity rate goes down, the more stressed people get. And so one of the ways that people cope with that is, I'm going to apply to 97 million schools and figure that some of these schools will actually take me. Not the greatest strategy in the world, but that's sometimes what people do. A second thing is with test optional, and this may be totally obvious, so please excuse me. If I don't have really good test scores, I'm probably not going to submit them. On the other hand, if I have really good test scores, I'm absolutely going to submit them. So what happened last year is that for many schools, the average ACT, SAT jumped because the only students that submitted the test scores were the ones that scored really high. So just one example that I know personally, 2 years ago, the University of Pennsylvania's average SAT was 1460, as if that's not high enough. And last year it was 1550, because the only people that submitted were those that scored really high. Now, again, I want to go back to what I said before about the majority of schools with test optional. They're not going to judge you on what you didn't send. They're going to evaluate you on what's in front of them. So with only a few exceptions of schools that really aren't test optional, even though they tell you that they are, you're going to get a fair shake with any of those schools. And by the way, a little bit of trivia here. We're talking about selective schools. What are the 3 most selective schools in the United States based on acceptance rate? Number 1, number 2, number 3. Number 1 is Minerva University.
Yeah, okay. And I was going to say
number 2 is Deep Springs College. And number 3 is the Curtis Institute of Music. Mm-hmm. Not what you expected, probably. but those are the three most selective schools in the country. And I would hopefully pray that people don't get caught up in what I consider to be the pursuit of prestige. Because number one, the word prestige comes from a French Latin root that means trickery. And number two, prestidigitation, you remember that's the word for magic. Okay, it's trickery to do. And number two, I could go to a clothing store and I could get a size 46 suit that's absolutely impeccably tailored, beautifully colored, matches my skin tone, and eminently durable. But I would look like a fool in a size 46 because I take a size 41. Not how the garment looks on the rack, it's how it looks on the body.
I love that analogy. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And our next question is, what's the difference between receiving a full scholarship and receiving full tuition? And that is a great question. And I think we often hear about a full ride, and it's unclear what that means. So colleges have a total cost of attendance, and that is going to include your the tuition, which is how much it costs to actually attend classes. And then it's also going to include room, your living situation, so your room and board, which is your food. And then sometimes they'll add into there those are the direct costs. So there's maybe an activities fee, something like that. So all of those things are the direct costs. Those are actually the things that you pay money to the college for. Then you have indirect costs like books and your computer, some transportation stuff if you need to get to the college, those kinds of things. Those are indirect costs. So the total cost of attendance usually includes all of the things that I just mentioned. And so a full scholarship would include everything.
Right.
Full tuition would mean that you don't have to pay tuition, but you still have to pay for your dorm room and your meal plan and your books and your computer. So that's the difference there.
And your weekly pizza.
Yes, that too. Especially if you're going to keep up your pizza blog while you're there.
That's right.
And then will colleges look at Keystone exams? They will not. They have no role to play. So they're not on, I don't believe they're on your transcript for any reason. And colleges don't ask for them. And so they don't look at them.
They don't, although by law they can be. A transcript from a public school, a public high school, by law contains only that information relevant to graduation. And so passing a Keystone exam is relevant to graduation. I don't know any schools in my area, I'm from southeastern Pennsylvania, that put Keystone exams on.
Yeah,
it's just like, what do you need to graduate from high school? You need classes, credits, grades, attendance. Now, I don't know any transcripts that have attendance on, but that is part of what you need to graduate. Are your SAT or ACT scores on your transcript? No, they're not required to graduate. Are your activities on your transcript? They better not be, because they're not required to graduate. It's just the legal part of what it means to graduate. So Keystone, no, not to worry.
And to remember too, that Keystones are really only a Pennsylvania thing, that other states have different things. New York has regions. There are other kinds of, every state does it a little differently. So a college that's outside Pennsylvania wouldn't even know what a Keystone was, probably.
Right.
And then as far as the SAT and ACT on transcripts goes, those scores should not be on transcripts. It's best practice to not have them on transcripts, but there are some schools that do put them on a transcript. Oftentimes it's schools, Title I schools, where students, where a lot of the students are low income, and so they're trying to save the students' fees for sending those scores, so they put them on the transcript because of that. And also there are times when schools offer like a school day SAT and they put that on the transcript. They shouldn't be doing that, but it's worth checking with your school counselor to make sure they're not doing that, because especially in this test optional environment, you really want to have control over your scores and you want to decide who sees your scores and who doesn't.
Amen. There's actually an easy workaround with that. It takes a little bit more time on the part of the school, which is to create a separate form for your SAT or ACT scores. And then if you agree to have your counselor send it, your counselor sends it. Simple workaround for that.
Right. All right. So, okay. So we've got, Michael says, if no one has another question, I'd like you to say more about what you said earlier. If you want to go to college X, but maybe you should apply as a major that doesn't have a lot of folks like you applying, does that also include least popular majors? So if you want to go to a school for engineering, which is very popular, could you apply as, say, a German major, small number of majors, and then switch your freshman year?
No.
Also, good.
No.
Yeah, let's start with there.
You can't. You can't. If you want to apply as a German major and then maybe switch to a French major, maybe, likely. You want to apply as a German major and then switch to history? Probably. Not engineering. Nursing and engineering must be started at a certain point and pursued sequentially. You can't cut in the middle. If you wanted to change to engineering, you're going to do an extra year of college.
Right. I will. And there's often not room for kids to transfer in. What I'll tell you is that also in a university setting where they have multiple colleges, like the College of Business, the College of Arts and Sciences, those schools, it can usually be very easy to change your major within the college that you've selected, but often very difficult to change your major to go into a different college. So if you switch from marketing to accounting within the School of Business, that's fine. If you switch from French to political science within the School of Arts and Sciences, that's fine. But it's very hard to go. It can often be hard to go across school. In a small liberal arts college, you can apply and they don't admit by major. So you can basically have interest in all kinds of interesting things and then change your mind once you're there because you're not in by major. And there are a small number of liberal arts colleges that do have engineering. And so I think for those colleges, you'd have to make that decision pretty fast, but I think that you might be able to switch into engineering from there. But the other thing is that I would say you don't want to game the system, right? You're not trying to say, hey, I want to be a classics major because there aren't very many classics majors, but really I like political science. It's just, I mean, first of all, I don't want to teach my kid to lie, and I don't think you want to teach your kid to lie. It's not what we, it doesn't feel good. But also I think sometimes that kind of stuff can really backfire on a kid and you can end up in a pretty unhappy place, going back to Cigus's suit analogy.
Yeah, I would say there's certainly a moral, ethical reason. I totally agree with Stacey. There's a practical reason also. Here's a perfect example. I want to be a doctor, but I know that it's tougher to get in as a so-called pre-med major. So I'm going to tell them I'm going to major in Latin. Okay, not a problem. The pre-med sequence and Latin are all in the same school, arts and sciences, right? So I'm going to major in Latin. I'm getting all this information about the Latin major. The Latin club is inviting me to come out. Semper ubi sub ubi. All this great stuff is happening. But I want to major in pre-med. So I go to choose my courses and I want bio, I want chem. And what do I find? Who gets preference to sign up for bio and chem? Not me. I didn't put pre-med. I don't get priority in signing up. So now I'm behind. Now I'm going to take summer classes. Now, if you want pre-med, let them know. Give them an idea of why you're interested in pre-med. Give a background. I've volunteered in hospitals, given with COVID, not hard to do. I've worked out as EMT. I bought the game Operation. I play it every night. Something that directly connects you with the healthcare system, and let the college know that you have a sincere interest in this. Now, ROTC works a little bit differently because ROTC sponsors you. So if you wanted to go to Princeton and you applied ROTC and you earned an ROTC scholarship, yeah, that might be a way that you would get in, but then you owe ROTC. And if you drop out of ROTC, then you have to pay all the money back that they gave to you. So that could be a little bit risky. And ROTC, for those who don't know, Reserve Officers Training Corps is what it is. And it's a branch of the military. It's reserve, so you're not on active duty at any given time, but you do your 4 years. You have 1 hour of class per week in your ROTC. You give 1 weekend per year to training, and you do a 6-week boot camp each year. That's your ROTC commitment. Then when you finish, you are on active reserve for 6 years. That's your commitment, is 6 years. So if there is, God forbid, some kind of natural disaster somewhere, you might be one of those people going down to help. If even more, please God, don't do this. If a war breaks out, you're on active duty immediately. So think through this. If this is something, this is a 10-year commitment. Think of it that way. I mean, God bless you if you want to serve that way. I admire you for that, but please be sure that you make a good decision with this.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah. And I'll also say it's not that easy to get out. To just drop it. It's not that easy. Like, I mean, yes, you have to pay all the money back, but also it's just like, they're not that excited for you to drop it. And it can be, and there can be a lot of pain along the way in that process. I have a friend who dropped out of ROTC, and it was not an easy path for him. And it was a very hard year for him because they really tried to keep him, and he really didn't want to be there. And it led to a lot of heartache on his part. So
yeah, I could see that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So cool. All right. Well, we probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions. I think we've got 4 minutes left in this session. And I hope it's been valuable for you if we don't have any more questions. And I hope that you're, what I would say too is like, talk to your school counselor, because your school counselor has a lot of really good information. So feel free always to reach out. And then, we have one last question. Is it smarter to ask for recommendations now versus the fall? I would say yes, definitely. Your teachers are thinking about you right now, so this is a great time to do it. And I highly recommend using SCORE. I think SCORE is a great tool. If your school is using it, that's great. But if your school is not using it, your student can still make a free account, and then you as a parent can also have an account linked to theirs.
Right.
John?
And for recommendations,
Yes. Go ahead.
whom should you ask for recommendations? Okay, let's start with whom you should not ask. 9th grade teachers, too early. Colleges don't want to hear from 9th grade teachers. There are a few that really don't want 10th grade teachers, but they're far and few between. So 10, 11, and 12, and it must be from an academic core subject. So English, math, social studies, world language, science. Now, if you are pursuing a VPA, visual or performing art, that becomes a core subject. So as your music teacher, your art teacher could be one of those to do. As much as we know you love your gym teacher, no, not even if you're going to be a gym teacher, not appropriate to do. Typically, you'll ask 2 teachers, even though not all schools want to. There are only 5 schools of which I'm aware that want more than 2, and those are the 5 service academies. They typically ask for 3 letters. So you would get 2 letters. Your counselor will write a letter that sort of represents the school's endorsement of you. And then almost every college will accept and read the alternate, the other recommender letter as well to do.
Thank you. All right,
right.
John, take us
Yeah,
out.
those 40 minutes, 25 minutes went by very quickly for you all. So thank you all for all the questions, and definitely, hopefully you learned some great information that's going to help you in your admissions journey as well. And so for all of us here at Pennsylvania ACAC. Thank you for coming. Don't forget there are other sessions you can also attend this evening as well, so please do those. And don't forget there'll be a recording of the session available in about a week at strivescan.com/Pennsylvania. Have a great evening and enjoy the rest of your time.
Thank you, John.
Thanks,
Thank you
John.
both as
Thanks,
well. Have a great
everybody.
one.
Thanks for the great questions.
Yes.